Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. So this is a follow-up joint, and we got to have a preface, a preface. So I recorded a joint a few hours ago. Right at sundown. The hiding of the soleil. Prolonging the breaking of fast. Oh, such generosity. Anyways, then after that, as I prepare food, had food on the table, drink on the table. I have the occasion, the impetus, for lack of a better word, of sharing a follow-up, which is what I'm sharing at this point, God willing. So the idea was just do something brief. See, you know how that is, brief. Turns out to be an hour and a half. Hungry. And I begin by telling a story or giving a description about something, trying to be further narrative like, to describe the point, the message. So after an hour and a half, yay! Finally, fantastic, completed. Not quite, because storage used up, did not take. So an hour and a half. Now, hey, it is what it is. I begin to break fast at that point. So that's what this is. The conclusion of that. Now we're at past midnight now. I should be sleeping now. So I'm going to try to share, God willing, this idea, this vision, this understanding. There's layers to it, and additionally, but I will, God willing, share the narrative that I shared before to put it into some kind of further effective context of understanding and comprehension and cooperation. So, and cooperation not with what I will or what I think or what I do, but just with each other. How about that? How about that? Coffee after midnight. So, it's energy from Ethiopia. What I share is that back in the day, mail, post, mail, snail mail is sacred. It's sovereignty. When we think about just the written word and receiving a letter particularly that travels long distances overseas from somebody, a loved one, like knowing, like it's been, how long has it been since we've seen this person, but here, this letter, this paper, this fiber of plants, and this ink was held by this person. So now it's not just like pixels and impersonations, but it's like palpable. And so it's like we store it. We fold it up carefully. We stack it up. We look back at it. We look at the handwriting. Yeah, that's that. Yeah, that's how they make their letters. That's how they write their characters. So though there's distance and we don't have all the other things like photographs. This is back days before electricity. We don't have photographs and all these other type of things to remind ourselves of that person. We have a letter. We have a written word. Even a drawing. So it's sacred, it's powerful. We can look at the lineage of letters, like from early days when sacred holy scriptures are written on scrolls and papers, even on papyrus and plant particles, bark, and additionally, like the messengers who will be entrusted to deliver it from one place to another, to share the guidance, to share the truth, to share the teaching, the wisdom, sacred, holy endeavors. And later, many thousands of years later, uh, within recent centuries, nations, particularly looking at this land of the Western Hemisphere in the United States, known as um, that endeavor of providing the messages, facilitating the messages, is done, completed, serviced by the government to deliver the letters from loved ones to loved ones. Sacred duty. And it's a sovereign duty, and it's a sovereign characteristic, so that when there are outposts where there are no roads and there's no electricity, no lights, and everything else like that, there's a post office. And when there's a post office, people feel connected. Oh, we're connected with the world. We can send things out. We can do our letters. We can do business. We can get checks. Well, then checks lightweight, kind of, sort of. But there's connection. There's relationship when there is that outpost, when there's that post office, and the mail carriers are like hardcore, tenacious. It's like military, serious, and any affront towards the mail getting through, um, the rain, sleet, snow, and additionally rain, shine. There's I got the saying right beforehand, but now yeah. Anyways, rain, sleet, or snow, whatever. Yo, the mail's getting through. The government being trusted for that. Any affront towards that, any tampering with mail facilities, a mail box, a mail office, the post office, a post carrier, yo, that's war, an act of war. Serious charges, federal offense, because that's how sacred sharing the message is between people, and how much trust is instilled within the government to provide that. When the government does that, people have loyalty to that because they're receiving the benefit of that. And this is even before money. Before money was even a thing in the United States, there was no greenbacks. There was the mail. That's how significant it is, historically, foundationally. And then again, when there's the mail, you can have things later like Sears Roebuck with their catalog, and you can now you can buy things, and do business. And additionally, before the prevalence of the telegraph and telephones and wires and everything else like that, it's mail, post mail. It's a sacred thing. And again, much of the credibility of the government is gleaned through providing that service. That's how sacred it is. That's how significant it is. Now these days, and that's the precursor for media these days now. So now messages are shared all the different times. Look at the post box right here. It's filled with junk mail, for the purposes of convoluting things and distracting people, and additionally, not even for the purpose of sharing information, but for blocking people's minds and distracting people away from whatever they're doing, so that they're less of a competitive threat towards others. So that's the sign of the times, as the artist formerly known and then eventually again known as Prince. Peace and blessings be with him. Um, so, but that's the foundation of mail, post mail, post office. And now, in that process, in recent generations, the services of delivery are convened by other private entities. DHL, FedEx, UPS, and additionally, and even now, in recent years, there's the evolution of things not even being done by exclusively or perhaps even predominantly by um, substitute mail services. I keep saying mail with that homonym, but post services, post mail services. Even that is even further um, homonistic. Anyways, the service of delivering mail is initially a number of centuries ago just the government. Then private entities started doing it. Now it's not even private entities just doing it. It's a matter of rainforest corporations that have their own products doing it themselves. Delivery services that are contracting and additionally. So now we're getting to another stage of how things are shared, how things are delivered, how people are connected. Much further, we're further iterations away from the foundation of government. So what we observe now is that the nations of today, literally at this very moment, the nations of today are satellite telecommunication networks. Those are the nations of today. Because those are the ones, the purveyors of the infrastructure that is predominantly connecting people of post-industrial society. And by this, we're not talking about Facebook. We're not talking about social media per se. We're talking about those who provide the internet service connection between people. And a lot of this is in the nascent stages, but that's what we observe as the effective nations, the sovereign earthly nations of today, and continuing to evolve, so that people like those where people's that's where people's primary allegiances and priorities are invested, along those lines of the who they trust with being their telecommunication satellite telecommunication um, network service provider. Um, and amidst that, and this is today. This is today. People don't proclaim it per se outright explicitly, but it's that this is today. Because that's how serious it is. That's how much people are enveloped in it. Particularly when you look at how much people are much are likely like this with their devices. How much people are dependent, not even just in terms of functionality communicating, but just like psychologically, how much people are attached to these joints right there. Government what? Election what? Huh? Serious? You talking about that? Now, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I mean just speaking to the actuality. So as things unfold, as things settle in, we do have things like policing, and things that are still into the immediate purview of the government, generally speaking. But even in that respect, already for a long time, for many years, for many generations, there are already alternatives to those necessities. We have campus police, mall security, private security. There are mercenary military services and agencies for hire. So there are all these other alternatives towards policing that already exist for a long time. Um, and so those are some of the those are some options for solving that need. And the consideration is just like with the mail, the post mail being facilitated through other entities, from private organizations to like contracting and other different methodologies. The same things that are typically same services, particularly policing, that are provided from government, being provided through private entities and contractors, and additionally, because people's primary concerns and interests and dependencies are on connection with the satellite telecommunications networks, and all the economics and learning and everything else, relationship, communication experience that is facilitated through these connections. I I'm starting to remember the things I was saying before. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be here for another hour. Yeah. Um, so that's what we observe. The nations of today are satellite telecommunications networks. Now that's still very much in the nascent stages. Um, the I'm trying to think of the important things to share at this moment, to be for it to be constructive reasoning. So all the different issues are like hitting me at this very moment that I was sharing before. So I'm trying to like categorize and prioritize. And then also just like vibe and just like, just feel it. So I'm going to deal with the streets, um, because, again, government provides services. Those services are necessary. So if we're looking at satellite telecommunications networks, the service that they provide is not policing outright. That's something that just people have to rely. People have to just like find their own contractor to provide those services. People migrate towards different enclaves, residential communities, and those residential communities have those arrangements. So that's what is seen as evolution. So again, looking back in terms of just the history of the United States, a lot of the industries um, that are necessary for people's basic functioning within society are historically provided and governed at least directly by the government, by the U.S. government, or heavily regulated by the government. Particularly even telecommunications itself. Every state has its own bell kind of system that was governing and administrating the telephone communication. Again, before the internet was pervasive, before mobile phones are available commonly, and additionally, but eventually, through the 80s and 90s, there's a significant amount of deregulation. There's a lot of privatization. Same thing with utilities, water, electricity, and additionally, those are things that historically are provided specifically from the government. Because back in the days, like over 100, 200 years ago, it's basically only the government that has the size of money, or not even money, but materiality, and people and knowledge to put this together and and do it responsibly, in a way that maintains certain social order and some semblance of fairness amidst the aggregate of the populace. And so because of that, like it takes a lot to put an electricity grid together and keep that going. And so like, okay, government, that's who has it. And so we invest our materials and everything else like that, and the government does that. And there's accountability, supposedly, in a democratic system where the people who are making those decisions have to eventually, at some point, answer to the people who are receiving those benefits. Now, we know how things work, and it doesn't generally happen that way, but that's how it's supposed to go. So at least some people can just like pretend and not feel put upon in that process. And if they feel dissatisfied with it, they go to a different municipality that works it differently. So that's generally how it's done, but it's the government doing it. Eventually, like as things evolve within the United States, those services, even prisons, become their purview and the business of private entities who are not accountable, not even pretend to be, and don't have a responsibility formally to provide for the well-being of people or to care about people. It's just about making money. That goes for electricity. That goes for um, water. Can I say water? Kind of, sort of. I'm gonna say kind of, sort of for that. To my knowledge, my specific personal knowledge at this moment, particularly here in Ohio, um, it goes to, again, prisons, and additionally. So, anyways, point being, like a lot of the services that governments historically provide, particularly the United States, are already being outsourced and contracted by private entities. So, um, the prospect and the progression of um, a global society, industrial society, um, referring to a satellite telecommunications network as its government, and then just kind of contracting all these other sources or other services. It's just a progression of what is already existing today. And I also I provide this disclaimer. Like what I'm sharing here is it's not intended as prophecy. I'm not saying God willing, because we're not communicating this as an intentionality or as a want. We're communicating this as an observance. I made the description in the previous joint that it's like looking at the seasons and just understanding how the seasons are, and saying, okay, yeah, in autumn there's orange and red leaves. And so that's just based upon our experience, what we study in previous seasons, that we can expect orange and red leaves to occur amidst the trees this upcoming season, God willing. I say God willing there, but anyways, that's akin to what I'm articulating here. Now, there's a certain amount of further detail and nuance, because what I'm articulating is something along the lines of like saying, this late winter here, we've received a modest amount of precipitation. We can anticipate the soil being comparatively drier than previous years, so we can make a decision about what we plant in terms of the seeds, and how much we can expect to yield from those seeds, particularly those seeds that grow in the early part of the year, in the late spring, and additionally. So we still plant seeds, but be mindful of that. When there's plenty of water, then we may plant a further amount of seeds. So um, it's something along those lines. So we're not trying to be like share some prophecy about like, oh, do this and that. We are communicating observation. And for those who have differences of opinion, and different visions, whatever, beautiful. Let's reason respectfully, and talk about that. We can talk, and it's just like talking about the nature of the season, and the precipitation. Oh no, we've had a lot of rain. We think it's higher than what you're describing, and then da da da. But let's talk about this. So, anyways, that's the disclaimer concerning what is being communicated here. So that being said, we continue to our regular programming, and yo, Big Daddy Long Legs right here. I'm tempted to invite the spider onto my finger so that it can be seen. But yo, it's busy building this web. I don't know how much I'm gonna let that web stay there. But like, I'm not gonna like disturb the spider just to present the spider. Now, I'm not accustomed to seeing a spider like this during this hour, but hey, whatever. Spiders lurk. Anyways, all right. So continuing on. I was talking about the manifestation, the unfolding, the settling in. Talking about the services again, policing. So this is something that naturally, organically manifests and progresses. So we already have people opting out of the conventional system in many different ways. People are already doing and making decisions, just not saying it explicitly along these lines, but it's still basically still doing the same thing that I'm talking about, and it being increasingly like the normalization of that. Um, so again, going back to this experience on the streets, not hating on policing, um, just communicating what the conditions are, and and there is a need for safety and security within our communities, and part of the purpose for me sharing this is so that we can facilitate the optimal stewardship and facilitation of this progression, um, in a way that is optimally well, and um, peaceful, prosperous for all kinfolk. That's the purpose. It's not a matter of being alarmist or rabble rousing or whatever else. It's a matter of just communicating this understanding, and encouraging mindfulness and discipline, compassion and altruism and generosity. So honesty, and modesty. So um, with regards to the police again, um, people migrating. So in this like further establishment of satellite telecommunication network nations, those network nations, getting to the point of prominence of actually issuing currency beyond just like Bitcoin or whatever else, but specific currency within their own networks, competing with each other, and vying for membership, constituency, and participation, and having issuing currency so that people abstain from utilizing national currency, fiat money, that only has value because people think it has value. It's not full-bodied money like metals like gold and silver, or other type of tangible things like wampum and kola nuts. Um, but these networks issuing the currency to facilitate economics. Now that there's advantages to that, there are disadvantages to that as well. There's all types of proclivities of coalitions between the networks, and additionally, much like with the airlines, having the star alliances and all these other different types of stuff amongst the different distinct um, airlines. But network nations, existing as nations, having the influence of nations. That's the nations the of the almost had a term for civilization based upon communications, telecommunications civilization. Um, those are the nations, and eventually, like the nations that are known for the past century, and even recognizing the phenomena of a nation itself is a very very new kind of phenomena. Before that, it's kingdoms and empires and stuff like that. So particularly democracy, democratic nations, republics is just a very new phenomena. So, um, but anyways, all right. So as the national governments dissolve and the network nations become increasingly established, and become formidable and self-knowledgeable and proficient in governing, enacting policy that influences economic and social behavior. Um, Again, what does it look like on the street? So the networks um, facilitate economic activity, issue currency, establish policies again to encourage membership within its networks, the respective networks, and then also um, participation. Um, and through these networks, people have their jobs, people have economics, and do a lot of the human or humanoid occupations are very much intangible, abstract kind of services. So um, the pretenses of economics and socioeconomics are significantly facilitated through membership and participation within a respective and one or further. Like people can have dual citizenships, dual memberships with different networks, but through those affiliations, having economic um, sustainability as a household, and with that deciding, okay, so where do we reside, and then being able to select what residence in terms of like what location, what different enclaves based upon the services that enclave has arranged, has contracted. Education is a significant priority amongst kinfolk in this respect, but then also things like security and additionally. And so each enclave having its own policies and arrangements concerning those additional services that are predominantly contracted. So all those things that the government, historic governments do for generations and even centuries are now done through private agencies, um, and residential collectives making those arrangements, and so people making decisions along those lines. That's already being done with the advent of suburban municipalities, particularly within the United States, and the differentiation between these municipalities in terms of education, um, and further utility is lightweight, but definitely security and other types of policies. But just the evolution of apartheid. So, but this is through the advent of post-government society. So people just reside in different places. Now there are treaties that are cultivated between the networks, so that we have some semblance of order amongst the networks, minimize and mitigate conflict and the sabotage and additionally towards each other in terms of like tampering with others' satellites and signals and stuff like that. So all just like with the United Nations, having these kind of things that are supposed to be done between the networks, and that includes the arrangements that in terms of security, and additionally with these different residential collectives, so that like there's recognizing that residential collectives abstain from invading other residential collectives and utilizing private security agencies or whatever for the purposes of invading or stealing or robbing or threatening other agencies or whatever. So I mean, just these things are done, but just through the advent of the network nations, and there being tribunals and hearings, and when there's violations, then the collective of the network nations, just as the League of Nations and the United Nations are supposed to be doing, is done through the network nations. And um, so there's that. Um, and I mean, there's like the proactive kind of um, poster perfect or poster picture version of this, of whereby there's just um, there there are designations of these residential collectives emerging here and there, different people having different um, 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 initiatives to do this, to be leaders in this path. And so being proactive in planning and constructing and renovating actual spaces, residential facilities, and essentially villages, and in recruiting and inviting people to participate in it. So there's that kind of like picture perfect kind of scenario. There's scenarios where there is conflict, people vie for the same spot, and even it being contentious with weaponry. And additionally, there's just the understanding of that as part of the nature of humanoids. Then there's also the scenario of like, abandoned places in urban areas, and additionally, and collectives organizing and developing plans and implementing plans of renovating these spaces. So there's all different types of scenarios of how these collectives are established. And then when those collectives are established, again, significantly autonomously from the standing, the historic preceding national governments and the municipal and the hierarchies of state and local governments, but at the same time, even with in cooperation with and with like a nod of like okay and sanction, and additionally along these lines, and even through cooperation and whatever feigned cooperation is necessary, whatever, but just all these different scenarios of it being done to the point where eventually the norm is these collectives. And in these collectives, again, each collective having its own, just like with municipalities having their own police force, these collectives having their own private security. So that addresses like one of the major things that governments are still providing, one of the services the governments are still providing at this moment. Other than that, what other need do people have for governments? Education. Many people do private education already. Utilities. Many people live off the grid already. Um, Military. Other than that, what other services is the government providing? That's a priority amongst people. Um, Policing for some, education for some. Uh, we can talk about healthcare and all these other types of things, but healthcare is not provided by government people, government personnel, by and large, at least with the United States, is provided by doctors, private agencies. It might be funded through the government and currency and monetary and everything else like that. And there may be welfare, all those are, but the government's not doing an actual service in that respect. The government is a facilitator of that, and that is done and can be done by social workers and other entities as well. So, anyways, generally speaking, like utilities, sometimes, and policing. And I don't mean to be dismissive of government, particularly local government or even national state government. But when we look at what the services are that are being provided and the priority services that are being provided, it gets narrowed to that element. And those are still things that people can do on their own and things that people are doing on their own already. So that's some of the vision of what it looks like unfolding and settling in as a norm. And again, recognizing that much of these methodologies of self-sustenance amongst residential collectives is facilitated through telecommunications, satellite telecommunication networks. Um, so I mentioned in the previous joint that is unrecorded, presumably, although it's out there in the ether, um, that there are kinfolk who don't want to be part of this. I ain't trying to be this and the other. So one thing is that for those that are like that, yo, that's beautiful, that's holy, that's sacred. That's a level of indigenous that is sacred and is warrants protection. Like people should be protecting kinfolk like that. But if kinfolk are already on the internet, additionally, kinfolk aren't on that life. So for those that don't want to be enveloped, beautiful, and they're not watching this at this moment because they're not enveloped. So it's comparatively potato. I mean, six of one, half a dozen of the other. It's like, anyways. For those that are watching this, the kinfolk are connected, and enveloped, and caught up to some degree already. So, um, just to be honest about that, recognize that, and to keep a distance from the blowback, from this involvement, from the competition, from the atrocities. It's a matter of just not taking as much from it. It's plain and simple. When cats is in the game, and the deeper the cats are in the game, the deeper the consequences from the game. If cats don't want to get into that, then it's a matter of not taking from the game accordingly. Now, for those that do recognize, yo, I gotta be in the vicinity thereby somewhat. It's a matter of doing it in a modest way, as minimally as possible, and when doing it as righteous as possible, meaning doing it as honestly as possible, as compassionate as possible, and as modestly as possible. Um, and so the notion of uh, I think about kinfolk of African ancestry. I think about kinfolk of Native ancestry. I think about kinfolk indigenous around the world who are less interested in like the advances of technology and all the vying and all the consequences of that, as well, the pollution with that. Um, but at the same time, still have some kind of like connection and necessity on the infrastructure and additionally. So part of that consideration, one of the considerations, is establishing an independent satellite telecommunications network. That sounds like huge, but it's already being done. I mean, again, my knowledge about the details of the technology and everything else is comparatively modest, but it is accessible. There are a number of agencies, a number of entities that are putting up satellites at this moment. Now, obviously, like a global satellite telecommunication network is a considerable thing, but it is accessible. And for those who have that proclivity of staying away from the atrocities but still accessing the technology, that is a prudent option, a prudent methodology. But it involves investment. It involves letting go of certain things, prioritizing certain things. But the thing is, like with that, like having, if it's a collective, if it's a black collective, a Pan African collective, a Pan European, like Nordic, European heritage collective, a Chinese collective, a Muslim collective, a Native collective, whatever the kinfolk's common bond is, and interest in having this satellite telecommunications network nation, having that autonomy of not relying upon another entity and the policies and the politics and the prejudices of another entity in order to gain access to communicate with loved ones, and additionally, then having an independent network, um, and putting that together. Now that might require partnership with another entity, or coalition and solidarity with another entity, but it's accessible, and it's actually increasingly prudent to do that. And the consideration is in doing that, then not having to pay for, have a monthly subscription charge for mobile phone or for internet service, so that access to music, access to storytelling, access to information, full stop, there it is. And each entity, each collective can determine its own policies about what its membership has access to, how much can be utilized. It might be just, it can only access it on the weekends, or can only access it during certain hours, or only can access it for a certain amount, or for certain things. Each entity, each collective, each network nation can determines its own policies regarding that. Just like back in the day with mobile phone, like, to call during the day was extremely expensive, like 100 times, 1,000 times further expensive than to call after 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. because people making calls during the day, they're doing business, so they're going to charge business further amount, and it's a drain on the system. So they're going to like limit how much people are going to use it during certain hours. Otherwise, the system shuts down. But then afterwards, like when business is over and hardly anybody's on it, so that, fine, you can talk for hours after 7 p.m. or whatever else. So it's a matter of a network making those decisions according to what the priorities and the principles of its people are. And again, when it's its own independent, autonomous network nation, then it's further conducive and further affirmational to the ancestry, to the principles, to the heritage, to the dreaming, the dreams and the vision, and the interests, the rituals, the culture of the people of that network. So, and one of the considerations is that in these conditions, just like with League of Nations and the United Nations, and additionally, is that it doesn't have to be a big competitor with the others, whatever. There's the prospect and the suggestion, the guidance of having like small entities that just like modest joints just do this their own networks. They're not trying to be like big take over planets type of network, but just we doing this just to keep our communication, share our culture, and there because of that, then we agree like we're not going to be out there conquering others, and you also agree, you being the bigger entities of this world scene, this world collective of network nations, you also agree to abstain from invading us and like obstructing us and sabotaging us. And additionally, and if somebody ever violates that, then the rest of you hold that other entity accountable. So that's the nature of international policies and international diplomacy and treaties. And additionally, so it's the same thing with network nations. So there's that, but it does require kinfolk to have certain sovereign mindset, certain responsibility, and not relying upon others to do it for oneself, but to for leadership to know enough about the basics of these technologies to know what is necessary for its own people, to have advisors and kinfolk within the community who have the detailed knowledge about that, and to recognize, it requires investment. It requires, like, we're gonna have to let some of these unnecessary things go within our community, like fast food, oil, personal vehicles, and those things that people are like vibing with, or like getting comforts in laziness and distraction and confusion with. We're gonna have to let some of that stuff go that people are spending so much time and energy and materiality on. I'm seeing a lot of community. All right, so letting that go and investing that energy and investing that materiality, and that concentration of mind towards these priorities of sovereign communication, the network nations, and additionally, so there's leadership that's necessary to make those decisions, to communicate that to people, to the constituencies, and continually, like, remember we said we were going to do this, remember that, we're going to do. And eventually, there is the fruits of that, because when you are able to, now the devices like the mobile phone device and everything else like that, I mean, there's a huge variety of that again, that's not the sovereignty, that's just like the That's that's just a ways experience. Just like with the social media, that's not the sovereignty itself. There are all different platforms and everything else like that on the internet where people connect. That's not the sovereignty. The sovereignty is actual service connection. But eventually, like when putting those, giving the kinfolk, having the kinfolk have their devices, whether it's a laptop, all the different things people have these days, laptop or mobile phone or something, the pad, or whatever it's called, whatever. When people actually see, like, oh, yo, okay, you mean I gotta connect it? Like, I mean, the same concept was done with the government phone a number of years ago, even through this day, about recognizing, people need to connect with the people, and the people who are like so-called authorities, the governance, need to make that available for people because that's the job. So this is what we're talking about. And when a leadership within the community is able to establish its own independent satellite telecommunication network, and show the result of that, the fruit of that. Okay, here's your connection. You don't have to worry about paying a bill. You don't have to. You got this connection, just like the water fountain. You got this connection. It's here. And when you have this connection, now you can get music. You can get music that's healthy. And again, the parameters of what's accessible, all those things about blocks and censorship and everything else like that governments impose upon its service providing. A sovereign network is its own sovereign network. And so that's one of those things that's negotiated in the treaties. Like, yeah, no, you can't block us from this, that, and the other. So you do that with your own constituency. We have our constituency. So and different networks, nations may be like, yeah, no, we're blocking all pornography. Yo, no, we're blocking all of this. Yo, we're blocking all that. And so each one makes its own decisions based upon its own principles and its own heritage and priorities. So again, we put that when you share that device, the computer, the phone, or whatever, the pad with the people, they see, okay, yo, all right, now I can communicate. You mean I can call my kinfolk in the other side of the globe, and it's not going to cost me nothing? Yo, serious? Okay, now we're seeing some of the fruit. So yeah, maybe it's worth letting go of my vehicle. And additionally, instead having a bus system or a commuter shuttle system to get me where I need to go, to get us where we need to go, from a residential collective to all the different spots that we go to. Um, Kinfolk start to see the benefit, the prudence, the wisdom within these arrangements. They're like, yo, we were going to spend how much on our vehicles this past year, and instead we just put a tenth of that towards our satellite telecommunication network, and now we got communication we don't have to pay for. Huh? What was we thinking? We was gonna pay how much for rent, and now we got a residential collective where we don't have to pay at all for rent. What was we thinking? Sovereign mindset. Now again, it's not a snap of the finger. Most often, it's not a snap of the finger. It takes work. It takes devotion. It takes letting go of stuff. It takes leadership and discipline and making decisions and staying the path, and staying focused personally, staying focused collectively, amidst the temptations, amidst the distractions, amidst the ambitions, amidst the fatigue of being up past midnight. So that's the satellite telecommunications network nations where we are already today. There are a few established around the world. It's nascent in terms of like a sovereign phenomena. And even the entities at this moment most likely abstain from proclaiming self-identifying as nation. And that's one thing. Oh yeah, all right. So this is the other element I'm supposed to address something I mentioned before about Buddhism, about like how the world culture of satellite telecommunication network nations continues to evolve. So as it is today, many of these companies that provide this service abstain from having a genuine, thorough foundation of ethics and principles, set of beliefs, and discipline to govern people. These are businesses that basically find opportunities of making money, that money being generated by governments, generally speaking. So these companies have yet to have the full responsibility that governments have in terms of identifying the principles by which people live, and holding people accountable to those principles. If they trip, lock up, and other stuff. So companies haven't had to worry about that. Companies generally have been incorporated within an established government, and just have let the government deal with those type of headaches and responsibilities. So as sovereign satellite telecommunication network nations, these entities have to make those decisions, have that responsibility, have those headaches, need that training, need that discipline, and need to go deeper than just business and just technology, to be able to endure, and to be resilient, within the competitions, within the demands, within the foibles, and additionally, in this earthly walk. So where do companies get that from? It doesn't come from the governments, because the governments are dissolving, the democratic-based governments. So then it's necessary to look for something deeper, further traditional, further rooted. That's where we get into religions. That's where we get into cultures and heritages, and additionally. And so the type of foundational principles and practices that these entities need, by and large, particularly the larger worldwide entities, there are a number of components, a number of characteristics, that these network nations, these sovereign satellite telecommunication network nations need. One is that there has to be ethics. Like it's not just a matter of obeying laws that somebody else sets, and so this is just how we stay out of jail, and this is how we keep our money type of stuff. But no, we need ethics that genuinely guide us, to guide our decisions, that guide the culture of our community, the expectations of the people who participate, the social order, the consistency, the trust, the loyalty, and additionally, because ultimately, like, government is not conducted by authority. Government is conducted by people, regardless of whether it's democracy, monarchy, dictatorship, or whatever else. The social order is facilitated by people, by the masses, and those masses do it through shared principles, and a shared narrative, and a shared interest. So the government articulates those principles, and epitomizes those principles, but it has to have the knowledge how to do that. And the art of statecraft is how the authority shares those principles, inspires, disciplines, calls out notices and proclamations of reminders, and encouragements, and additionally does reprimands, has tribunals, and additionally, but ultimately the people have to practice that. So the government entity has to identify what those principles are, and then hold all people, including the leadership, accountable to that. So that's something these companies that are essential network nations need, is ethics. That govern themselves, govern the leadership, and the essential governments. Like, the companies are governments, and so all the personnel, all the people who work for the companies are the government workers. So the ethics, that's one thing. Second thing is relationship with the ancestors, relationship with all our relatives. So companies, and again, these are worldwide kinfolk, companies that networks that have constituencies on numerous continents. So each of these entities needs a meaningful relationship, meaningful knowledge, meaningful proficiency, literacy, and support for and from the ancestors of the people, the constituencies that are involved within that network nation. It's not just a matter of lip service and like just showing up for certain events or whatever, and photo ops. This is like thorough knowledge and support and relationship with the ancestors of the people, to be enduring, and next level pluralism. So that's another element. Um, and the third element there is kind of like I already did it. It's kind of like this multiculturalism. So I guess that's included within it. I guess those are the two things actually. I mean, obviously the first one is just the technology of it itself, like the actual service. Um, but the other elements to add to what companies are already doing that we have yet to see companies do, because pretty much companies, the other two elements are ethics and then relationship with ancestors. And particularly for those that are the world, that relationship with ancestors is multicultural. I guess that's 2.2. Is that whatever the governing kinfolk are of a network nation, those governing kinfolk, when having a constituency that is multicultural, even not even just even having a constituency, but just the nature of the technology itself is multicultural. The technology is gleaned from knowledge and experience and teachings and wisdom from many different lands. So any entity that has that endeavors to have a proficient relationship with that technology, to utilize that technology in an enduring and prosperous way, needs to have an enduring and prosperous relationship with the ancestry of that technology. That's just nature. It's logical. It's facts. And it's significantly has yet to be cultivated. So, um, in a as a global norm. So, anyways, all right, don't have to be limiting here. Um, I guess those are three elements. One element, again, is just the technology and providing the government service of the satellite telecommunications network. Second is ethics. And then the third is relationship with ancestors and all our relations. So when we look at like where can companies get that kind of guidance, where can companies get that wisdom at this moment? Buddhism is what we observe as the most accessible um, um, opportunity in the immediate run for these collectives. One, because Buddhism has less of the authoritarian hang-ups that Abrahamic traditions do amongst Western kinfolk, recognizing most kinfolk from in these realms of science and technology have a very secular mindset, very often atheistic, agnostic, very much antagonistic and averse towards the judgmentalism and ostracism that historically exists within Abrahamic traditions, and so have a natural proclivity, if any in any direction, if in any direction towards Buddhism, because Buddhism is perceived as being non-theistic and abstaining from having the same kind of judgmentalisms. Buddhism isn't perfect. Buddhism has its own susceptibilities, and additionally, but that's generally what's recognized with concerning the relationship between science um, and religiosity. So I described in the previous joint a number of different descriptions. It went on for over an hour and a half. I shared something about the anthropological understanding of religiosity on Earth. Its progression. I guess I'll review this very briefly. It's the progression of religiosity on Earth as a phenomenon. And so what we recognize, what we observe, is that initially there's the indigenous experience. We all come from an experience of indigeneity, relationship with nature, the primordial, primal creation, and additionally, eventually through the generations, there emerges this experience of the city, and a specific kind of religiosity based upon the experience of the city, and we refer to this as fortified religions, and we can look at things like Babylon, and additionally where um, there are certain beliefs, and additionally, but a lot of the priority of the philosophy and the political philosophy um, is an ethic of working and hierarchy and industriousness to protect itself away from the ebbs and flows of the wilderness, of the barbarians. So those are the two. That's kind of like the primordial civilizational binary, which is again the barbarians and then Babylonians. Now the thing about the Babylonians is that within the city walls things get corrupt, and additionally, And so it often through the ages what we recognize as the rise and falls of civilization. Ancient Rome, ancient Greece, particularly ancient Rome, is a different story because we talk about the emergence of the Vatican and all those other things. That's the continuation of that. But around the world, there's the example of the rise and fall of civilizations. Ancient China is a little bit different because there's a continuity there. Similarly, kind of sort of with India, um, but the fortified cities rise and fall. So that fortified religiosity rises and falls. Now, amidst that, there's a third religiosity, which is what we refer to as, if I recall correctly, traditionalists. And so the traditionalists are those that have a lineage back through the primordial, and so live in proximity with the fortified religiosities within the cities, um, and have a certain literacy and functionality within the cities, but resist doing all the things that's being done in the cities, vying for the ascension within the hierarchy of the cities. In addition, say, no, we don't do that. I'm just going to go home and study, or I'm just going to go home and get some sleep, or I'm just going to go home and talk to my family. No, you can party. You can do all that yourself. It's okay. I'm going to do this. That's the traditionalists. And that avoids getting enveloped and entangled again in the blowback and the consequences of those indulgences and schemes and ambitions and everything else like that. So the traditionalists, an example of this is Abraham Avinu. There are additional examples of this as well. The tradition of Israel is a continuation of that. So those are the traditionalists, having a narrative that continues from creation. Zarathustra is an example of this. Lightweight, we can look at Jainism as this as well. But anyways, just that third category is the traditionalists that have that experience of both the wilderness or both the barbarians and the Babylonians. One thing I shared, I'll finish this part and maybe I'll share that. We'll see. So the fourth category is the reformists. So in the reformist scenario, Hinduism significantly exists within the traditionalist experience as well. So this is not, there's nothing saying one is better than the other of any of these categories. It's just a matter of observing this experience and like categorizing it accordingly. So the fourth category is reformist, and so primarily the reformist religiosities are Christianity and Buddhism, not in the order and chronologically, but Buddhism and Christianity. In these experiences, a teaching emerges amidst the traditionalists, and that acknowledges and affirms the truth that exists within each of the phenomena that I mentioned: indigenous, traditional, and indigenous, fortified, and traditional. But is based within the traditional experience. However, also acknowledges that within the traditional experiences there are rigidities, because in the traditional experience there is the Varna system, there is the caste, and people are relegated to a certain position within the traditional hierarchy infrastructure and limited to that, and thus experience undue, dishonest devaluation, subjugation, subordination accordingly. And when that occurs generation after generation, there becomes a fervor of like, yo, no. And so amidst that, the Buddha emerges, Jesus emerges as saying, this traditional experience, it's avoiding the trappings of the fortified religiosities, but it's committing its own transgressions and even atrocities. And so there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of pragmatic benefit and value within the tradition, but at the same time, like, we got to let go of that hierarchy. Now, to do that, what's done in the reformist religiosity is letting go of the household life itself, letting go of procreating. That's what the Buddha teaches. That's essentially what Jesus teaches for those who have ears to hear. So it's saying everybody's equal, yet in order to be equal, people have to let go of having children, of procreating. That's the price to pay for that. So that's the reformist religiosity. Then from that, after the reformist religiosity, we have the reconciling religiosity. And so this is where we find Islam, this is where we find Sikh, this is where we find Baha'i. And in this particular category of religiosity that emerges chronologically in the progression of what I just described, there's an acknowledgement again of the teachings from before, the lessons that are learned, the lessons that have yet to be learned, and the message that is shared is one of that progresses, that builds upon the preceding teachings, and reaffirms the experience of family, reaffirms the endeavor of procreating and having children, being married, having children, and provides a doctrine of ethics and behavior accordingly. So again, that's Islam, that is Sikhi, that is Baha'i particularly. There are other traditions as well, but in terms of world religions that have a distinct calendar, those are some of the examples of that. And I mentioned again before, China kind of has a number of these different elements accordingly. So that's further beautiful conversation to have, and we invite that reasoning. And again, we're at past an hour. It's past 1:30 at this point, or it's just about 1:30 at this point. So yeah, serious. It's time for me to get some sleep. Rejuvenation. So that's my rebuttal for anybody providing some criticism about the lack of proficient balance in articulating the qualities and categorization of the religiosities of the entirety of the geography of this spheric experience. So that being said, and humor is not going to cover it up either. How about that? Continuing on though, with honesty. Those are the 5 major categories that we observe in terms of religiosity. So then when we look at today, as these network nations are looking for some foundation, some rootedness, to be stable, to answer the needs that the network nations have of ethics and technology capability, ethics, and relationship with ancestors. Where do these entities, where can these entities and where do these entities find that guidance? And again, we simply see, particularly those with the technology capability and proclivities, the interest, that being Buddhism. And this is not advocacy for Buddhism, it's not proselytizing for Buddhism, it's not selling or promoting Buddhism, it's just observing this. And I mentioned before in the previous recording, lightweight recording, somewhat recording, presumably recording that did not record, that I gave some rationale amongst all the different religions that I just mentioned about why those are less proximate than what Buddhism is. Each one has its own proclivities and propensities for being its own nation network and having multiple network nations based upon within this. So there's that. But in terms of a predominant paradigm, we simply see Buddhism as a facilitator of that. And the reason is because it answers those 3 things. It provides people to study and have that technology knowledge. It has ethics. It has a foundational, clear set ethics that are shared amongst all the different traditions. The other traditions have ethics, but it also facilitates that relationship with ancestors. Ironically, because before I get into further details about the rationalization concerning Buddhism specifically, what I also say is why some of the other challenges concerning the other religions that I mentioned, of why it makes it further distant compared with Buddhism across the board, regardless of geography, east, west, north, south. And this is again for those entities that have constituencies of multiple continents, regardless of where the leadership is based. The nature of empire, the paradigm of empire is increasingly antiquated, at least for this moment and for this age. It is an age of pluralism because people have knowledge, people have enough. Well, all right. It's age of pluralism. So, because of that, the network nations, the governance requires these 3 characteristics of technology, know-how, ethics, and relationship with ancestors and all the relations. Um, so some of the reasons why some of the other traditions are further distant than what Buddhism is, in providing particularly secular inclined Western mindset type of an Eastern mindset as well, less so because Eastern mindset also has Taoism and additional opportunities and options for rootedness in providing. So that's part of much further and beautiful conversation. But particularly looking at from the Western, with a Western, somewhat of a Western lens or bias at the moment, particularly seeing I'm speaking English at this moment, in addition to other languages. Um, some of the religiosities. First, just Abrahamic traditions. Again, there's a bad experience, a bad vibe with the masses about judgmentalism, violence, subordination, and again across the board, slavery is allowed. So yeah, on the world scene, that's intolerable. And in terms of particularly with the prospect of letting go of one's affiliations and just exclusively identifying in one respect, um, and availing oneself to being enslaved. Uh, yeah, nah. So that's one thing. And I've mentioned recently also, sexual exploitation is also something that is permitted within each of these traditions. Amidst all the legalism, each of the traditions, particularly Judaism and Islam, the tradition of Israel and Islam, identify all these principles, all these behavioral requirements, the mitzvot, the deen, of what to do, what not to do. And in those to do's and don't do's, slavery is permitted, it's discouraged, but it's permitted, and sexual exploitation of slaves, a man having sex with his female slaves is allowable, it's permitted. So right there, even though in the today's modern sensibilities that just seems atrocious, it's permitted in the old school religion, old time religion of Islam and Israel. Now, we're not even looking at Christianity because Christianity essentially allows anything as long as people proclaim Jesus afterwards. It allows anything. And that's just the actuality. Christianity as a religion. Now, Jesus himself doesn't, but Christianity as a religion does. So we don't really, and also Christianity doesn't, as a religion, doesn't give a list of do's and don't do's. So it relies, presumably, I have to be mindful of my compassion. Just plain facts. Christianity is based upon the tradition of Israel. Now, some Christians say that, okay, well, then when it comes to how people are supposed to behave, look towards Torah, because that's what Jesus practices and that's what Jesus teaches. But then some say that, oh, no, all that's out the window. We don't have to do that. No kashrut, no Shabbat. And additionally, because it's a new age. But in the new age, there's an absence of a doctrine. We can look at Paul. We can look less at Peter in terms of the letters and additionally for that explicit guidance. But it's essentially, there's an absence of a definitive list of do's and don'ts after Jesus. So if those who want to live as Jesus does by Torah, and additionally, then there's the mitzvot to live by. If people want to live as Paul prescribes, and additionally, it's then people actually are practicing what Paul teaches rather than what Jesus teaches. But that's another conversation. Point is that ultimately there's an absence of an explicit, exclusive set of laws in this earthly walk, other than love oneself and love God and love others as oneself. Um, so we don't even look at Christianity in terms of that kind of consideration about ethics because um, it's not, and that's not a dig, that's not a slight, that's not disrespect, but just in terms of like looking for a formal doctrine that says what to do, what not to do. There's an absence of that within Christianity specifically. We look at the Torah, we look at the tradition of Israel along those lines, and we do see that. We see the 613 mitzvot, we see the 10 mitzvot, and additionally, when we look at Islam, we see the deen, we see the teachings provided within the Quran that say, do this, don't do that. Now, similarly within Hinduism, Buddhism, in Hinduism, there's an absence of explicit do's and don'ts. A lot of the do's and don'ts are specifically um, pertain to different people within society, and so there are different do's and don'ts for different people. Within Buddhism, there are do's and don'ts, generally speaking, and it's not a matter of like doctrinal, like do this or don't do that. It's a matter of like it's beneficial not to do this. It's beneficial to do that. The Panchasilas, the five ethics of the Buddha, is an example of that. Um, in terms of Taoism, there are guidances, and it's basically that like statements of fact. Like if you do this, then you can expect that. If you don't do this, you can expect that. So there's an absence of like a list of commandments. So it's less applicable in terms of this consideration of guidance, um, in a doctrinal sense. Does a satellite telecommunication network nation need a doctrinal um, traditional foundation in order to be effective governance? That's discussable. We can reason about that, but at the moment, that's what the Western mindset is accustomed to. And so when we look at this transition process, that's one of the characteristics that we find necessary within such governance. So again, technology, know-how, ethics, and relationship with ancestors, and all our relations. So again, across the board, Abraham, Israel, Christianity, Islam, there are those challenges that I mentioned just a minute ago, and further. So when we look at Eastern traditions, Hinduism is somewhat specific, and again, there's less of the categorical doctrinal guidance, like a scientific kind of mindset of like just like very um, almost quantifiable, but just very, very rudimentary, like very, very kind of like explicit, orderly, less necessity of philosophizing and theological reasoning in order to immediately govern people and guide people and communicate with people. So, um, anyways, we see Buddhism as the most approximate option for people to find that, and we already see the relationship between science and particularly Western secularism and Buddhism as well. So it's a natural progression, particularly amidst this emerging and unfolding and settling in of satellite telecommunication network nations. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else at this moment to share. Rice is tasty today. It has some tomatoes with green peppers, chili peppers, and some curry, and some further red chili peppers, and a little bit of olive oil, some water to help with the consistency. So it makes the rice much further, not just palatable, but medicinal, clearing the system. All them peppers, peppers, peppers. Water too. Tea, and like I mentioned, some energy from Ethiopia. The coffee. Might have another cup. As I read, what are you doing? Go to sleep. What are you gonna get some other coffee for? It's the irrationality of this moment, and we become increasingly susceptible as the fatigue happens. So, there's something else. What else did I share before? I didn't take notes. I was just like riffing, yeah. So I'm just trying to think what I can share at this moment whilst there is this window. Yeah, I'm also preparing just to do my music. Um, like I'm so, this past year I was like, yo, doing these joints is like over. But to be honest, I become enveloped with the internet, and in that envelopment, this is observed as part of the consequence, or part of it's not a punishment, but just part of the effect of that, of contributing. So all right, what else, telecommunication, satellite telecommunication network nations. I already mentioned about education. People already get private education. Residential collectives have significant propensity of autonomously providing educational services. Particularly, like, don't even need that much. To be honest, what children need is stable relationship that children can feel trusted in. What I mean by that children can trust in, seeing the same person day in, day out, the same female guidance, women in the village, and men in the village. That stability that provides comfort, and security, and a sense of safety, so that the children's minds can focus further on learning, rather than having worrying about like protection or where things are being fed and everything else. So it's unnecessary to have huge schools, and again, people already know huge classrooms and everything else. That's not conducive to effective learning. Now, what is conducive is having that relationship, having that trustworthiness, and then with that, um, having instructors, lead teachers, assistant teachers, um, who are able to guide the children, for the children to learn on children's own, and then consult with the teachers when there's a question, where's the need, and then regularity, communication skills with classmates, and additionally, um, but it doesn't take that much. It's actually very simple. We do this for thousands of years with all these advanced ideas and everything else like that. So it's just like remembering what the basics are, what the basic essentials and priorities are. Let me tell it. Um, so in terms of residential collective, one point being, like I was saying here, is that you can have a teacher, one teacher for an entire school from kindergarten to eighth grade, a school of 20, 30 students. How about that? And those 20, 30 students are like in a facility the size of a house or the size of a small building. This is just one scenario. They're all different, so many different scenarios. But in that scenario, there's a learning space where there are tools. We can look at the Montessori method of just like the tactile learning methodologies of blocks and puzzles and additional things. So particularly at a younger age, but particularly as the students mature to the upper elementary, middle school level, a lot of that learning, as I understand, has been. I was my day. It was way before this, but it's done through these devices and through access through other things, and learning how to access information through these devices, particularly on safe networks. So it's unnecessary to have a cadre of teachers and everything, but just have one teacher that facilitates the learning environment, that has some knowledge, and for specialization, like having assistant teachers. Assistant teachers might show up once a week, twice a week, or otherwise. And again, it might be a sports specialist, might be a music specialist, math specialist, or whatever else beyond what the teacher is able to teach directly oneself. Um, but the thing is for the teacher to have patience, and to be supportive, and again, cultivate that experience of relationship and trust with the children, and safety. So that is much, much further effective today. It's much further effectively done in a small way, away from the government, away from the public school system, away from private schools, away from parochial schools, away from conventional school systems. We already know people do the homeschooling, and it's not even just homeschooling at this point. We're talking about schooling cooperatives and additionally. So those are the things that anyways. All right, so I'm getting to further spiel at this point, but the point is, like, this scenario of like the network nations as governments, as the governments of today, and all the other services being contracted in additionally. That is what it is today, um, and that is what is seen as increasingly and explicitly the norm of convention in the next few generations. Again, don't say God willing, because it's not a matter of wanting it to happen. It's not a matter of intending it to happen. It's a matter of what is observed. And we invite respectful reasoning from any kinfolk, any and all. All right, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I have a surprising amount of concentration still at this hour after this amount. I did sleep this afternoon. I had a nap because I did not sleep this past evening. So that might be one of the reasons why I have a considerable amount of energy at the moment to be able to continue blabber. I talked about dolphins and orcas and presentation. I don't know if that was the one I recorded or if that was the one that I recorded and didn't record. But I was talking about being a deer, being elephants. I was talking about being in law school. That's what I was, and I described that as being like a dolphin amongst the sharks. I don't know if it was this, if it was the recording that actually took, or or if it was the recording that didn't take. But I was just mentioning about that scenario of I was talking about my relationship with my classmates and like not being valued for being an excellent American legal student because I probably had the lowest GPA in the law school. Probably very, very. One of the reasons why I'm very confident in saying that is because to be honest, I'm confident in the other things that I bring to the law school during that period that make me valued within the law school, because it wasn't my GPA, it wasn't my studies in the classroom of what was being presented to me. So if I'm not doing that, why do you want me here? Why do the kinfolk want me here? Because I bring some other things to the table. So because of that, and perhaps because of my hubris of how much I consider myself bringing to the table in that respect, I think I probably had the lowest GPA because I know cats. Anyway, I'm very confident about having, and I don't mean to be. I don't mean to be braggadocious, and that might be like false like false modesty or whatever. So I have to be mindful of that. Um, but my point being, like, cats wasn't like, I'll put it like this. I'm very confident that people do have a positive experience with me. Like they genuinely enjoy, appreciate, value communication with me, even relationship with me, in a genuine, mutually respectful way. Because I mean, you just get a vibe. You see how people look and everything. And this is exactly amongst lawyers, a dolphin amongst the sharks. And so, why are the sharks messing with me like this? And so if it's like one of the cats at that point, even at that stage of life, even in mid-20s, but particularly in law school, they are extremely pragmatic. Ain't spending time messing on no BS. It's all about next moves. So why is cats like messing with me tough? And all things and praise to the Most High, Elohim, the ultimate reality creator, known by many different names. Why cats messing with me like that? And again, like, people would connect and socialize with other people because they think they can get some kind of job opportunity, or it would at some point down the road, networking may be lucrative or otherwise. Even, I mean, if somebody already has their connections, if it's a family member, or they already have a connection with a law firm, or they already hired or whatever, they like up and comer. Okay, yo, connect with that dude, connect with that sister, and like mention eventually that might pan out. Or it might be somebody who's like doesn't have any social skills, but they just in the books, and like, no, that the kinfolk knows is going to be valuable and knows that. So there are a number of different reasons why kinfolk associate with others, particularly at a social level. Invite them to the party, go to their parties, and additionally, spend time with them at the school, and additionally, and it's beyond just like the face value kind of thing, but just the genuine, like, let's chop it up. So why do kinfolk do that with me? Because I had them joints. I had certain connections, but it's not the connections that are typically valued at a law school where I'm at that point. But what I do recognize is that one, I'm congenial. Like I'm genuinely a nice guy as much as I can be, and with all thanks and praise to the Most High. But I'm honest. I'm genuine, and I'm respectful, and additionally, and I do have some intelligence. I do have some functionality in that respect. But what I recognize is that in an environment where people are scheming and it's very difficult to trust others, just to see a friendly face that like has functionality, legit, like is part of the circle in there, but ain't after kinfolk's jobs or whatever else. Yo, that's better than gold, cousin. Serious. Just like yo, somebody to talk to, and they not trying to like they not trying to game. They just like yo, how you doing, yo? So that's what I share during when I'm in law school. Now, I can't say that I wasn't without my own ambitions or whatever, because even just me living and with the intention of not practicing law was much further of an ambition than I anticipated it being. When looking at the repercussions and how it's perceived later on. But at that point, yeah, I'm not trying to get no law firm job. I'm not trying to take your thing. I'm not trying to take your clerkship or anything else like that. I'm not going for the bar. I'm not going for like the bar review or what's it called, the law review or whatever. I'm not trying to get all those credentials, so I'm not competing against you. I'm in school. I'm getting a grade. It's not the grade you probably want, so yeah, I'm not a threat. And beyond that, yo, I don't hate you. So yo, let's chop it up. We got something to talk about. Let's talk. Let's rap. So, anyways, what am I talking about with this? I recognize that's one of the things I bring to the table. Now, um, like I said, even during that point, I'm not necessarily 100% innocent. I do have vision and I won't say ambitions, but I do have path and intentionalities in life during that period, during that stage. And again, I wasn't scheming to like overthrow the U.S. government or anything else like that. But I was very definite in not being part of that. So, um, anyways, wow. Point being, I was valued for being nice in my perception. Let me tell it, by the grace of the Most High. And I was describing that before as a metaphor of being like the a dolphin amongst the sharks. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way towards my kinfolk, but people that's I'm not making that metaphor up. Lawyers are referred to as sharks. Um, and lawyers have a very Nordic tendency of embracing accusations and um, I won't say condemnations, but accusations and vitriol maybe, but particularly like insults and criticisms in addition, because that just fuels the need for law, and that gives lawyers work and a job. So, anyways, that being said, um, I was describing being like a dolphin, and I remember recent articulations that I share in another context about being a deer amongst lions. But when I describe that experience, I describe it as being a deer amongst lions, and a deer who has the capacity to transform into an elephant when need be. So when I was thinking of like an aquatic equivalent to the dolphin, the first thing I think about was orcas. Um, but orcas are also predators, and I'm not a predator. Elephant is not a predator. So a deer transforming into an elephant is a non predator transforming into a bigger non predator that can handle its own amidst the predators. Whereas a dolphin is a non. Actually, a dolphin is actually a predator too. I can't even be a dolphin. Ugh. I had to think of another metaphor. Maybe that's the reason why I'm rambling on about this. Like I had to process that. Haha, how about that? Anyways, the point I was saying, being a dolphin amongst the sharks, meaning that like the sharks at any point could just like, yo, lunch. But because there's genuine congeniality, and that was the basic point of me sharing this, is like, and for me to witness this, like for me to like testify to this on my own, it's it can be seen as being just egotistical and immodest, of like, oh, he's just showing how popular and charismatic he is amongst an elite intellectual set of kinfolk. But what I'm actually also articulating is that like the humanness of the kinfolk in law school who respond to what I share. I mentioned like when I walked through the hallways after I came back from Africa, talking with the Rastafari brethren, reasoning in Zimbabwe, came back feeling irie, without even knowing and having the literacy, the explicit literacy, but just having that spiritual affirmation and peace. And when I returned back to law school, because I was seriously thinking of stop jumping out before I stopped going to class. So I came back again from that spiritual awakening and experience and affirmation in Africa, reasoning with the brethren in Zimbabwe, and additionally, and I come back and it's one love. When I walk through the hallways, all kinfolk, I just see light. I see brethren and sistren, and I just say hi. Now I'm still lusting and everything else during that period. I had a while to go in my spiritual path, but at the very least, to the best of my ability, I am offering light. I'm offering peace and love as best I can at that moment. And I am offering it in an environment that is extremely hostile, extremely covertly hostile. And it is, if I start thinking about this now, it's late, I'm going to start crying. Because I think about the kinfolk who respond to me. And trust me in showing that the kinfolk respond to me in those hostile conditions of sharks. Sharks turning and say, what's going on? And going back into the feeding frenzies. All thanks and praise to the Most High. Learning not to sleep on anybody's propensity for love. And what I'm thinking about right now, see, I said I gotta wrap this up because I gotta go. But what I'm thinking about, like, I have friends first year, many friends, and many of those same friends that I had second year after going to Africa, stronger and beautiful friendship all the way through law school, after being done dirty and everything else like that, for continuing to this day. I speak with fewer at this moment, but even when I go to reunions, and additionally, a number of years ago, most recently, but it's still there. So that's who I knew before going to Africa. And so even amidst being like beginning in the spiritual walk intentionally, like lightweight, heavyweight, there are kinfolk that I know already who already love me, who I already love. And so to feel that kind of like responsiveness, it's like, okay, yeah, they already know. So come on, they already know. What I'm particularly thinking about at this moment is kinfolk that I didn't know in my second year, that I didn't see before, that I didn't notice, who respond, who might know me, who might not know me before that, but respond to me afterwards when I come back that second year. And again, understand how much trust is invested in somebody, even by just saying hi, even particularly in an extended conversation, talking about family, talking about life, even just one conversation in that environment, that's that's heavenly trust. Heavenly trust. So I'm particularly thinking about that at the moment. Um, when I think about, again, being the dolphin amongst the sharks. Um, maybe I'm the shark. How about that? Maybe I'm the shark. Um, I do think about the fox and the hound. I thought about that a lot when I graduate from law school. I think about that story a lot during that period, and me being the fox, me being ostracized at that moment, and being perceived as the rebel, and being perceived as like the criminal, the one, oh, he's a dirty, he's gonna eat the chickens, he's gonna eat the chickens, and thinking to myself, yo, dog is eating the same food I am eating. Why is the fox so vilified? Why is the fox the bad one? And not only that, by that point I'm becoming vegetarian, and so I'm like, yo, hold up, I'm not eating the chicken. I stop, and you still vilifying me. But it's the hound who's eating the meal that the farmer is providing, which includes the scraps of the chickens that the farmer, the agrarian, is slaughtering. So who's doing the dirty in this scenario? Anyways, that's not my point here. I was just saying that's when I think about myself as the shark. I did think of myself as the fox. But I'm a deer. I'm an elephant. I'm a gorilla. I am a bison. Um, I'm a bear, but I'm a plant eating bear. Um, there's something else about the kinfolk. Um, it ain't all it ain't all roses. Um, there are betrayals and there are misleadings, and there's scheming, and there's misleading, and all different types of intentional and unintentional. But what I recognize is that ultimately, any of those tendencies, any of those unfavorable experiences are simply the consequence and the continuation of my own indiscretions, indulgences, and transgressions, one way or the other, and intoxications, and the obscuring of concentration within myself, um, that results from those intoxications, and that being manifested in how people approach me. And again, people who are very skillful. Everybody is a genius. Everybody's a genius. Everybody's got tremendous skills one way or the other. In an environment like that, it's a particular type of skill set, that is known, that is intentional, and that is effective, and that is connected. Um, but everybody's a genius. Don't sleep on nobody. Look for it. Recognize it. Everybody's a genius. It's easier to see it within some than others sometimes, but everybody's a genius. Respect, respect. Anyways, I'm rambling at this point. Yo, serious. I'm awake now. I had coffee. Hey, all these excuses. Trying to think what else to share in terms of this joint. So, anyways, network nations. There is something I'm like. I guess I'm trying to figure to remember to share. Um, but and now this joint is longer than the previous joint. So I've now spent over nearly 2.5 hours doing this joint. Um, I will say again, like, yo, I've mentioned before, um, being taken significantly away from my spiritual practice in the recent weeks. Serious. Um, and abusing my body. Like, it's interesting how it's done, just very subtly, and it's myself doing it against myself. Um, but it's amidst the conditions as well. So I have to. I'm processing this and trying to work. Like right now, the chair I'm sitting in does not have beneficial posture. I'm leaning on a desk and leaning forward. That's not beneficial for the back. When I do that, then that affects how much. I'm already bending my legs right now, so that provides susceptibility for the cramping of my hamstring. And so the remedy for the back and the remedy for the hamstring often require different postures of laying and sitting. And so dealing with both at the same time is an interesting endeavor, and I'm learning. This is the process, not complaining, but learning. But recognizing that me sitting like this for an hour and a half, 2 hours is not the most beneficial thing, either for my hamstring or for my back. It's not the worst thing, but it's not the best. Um, excuse me. Uh, d- 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 so I was talking about fatigue, but I can see right now my concentration is waning as well. For the moment, fatigue. Uh, what am I trying to think of right now to share along this line of network nations? Uh, I didn't have any notes. I was just sharing this journal as is. Um, I think I've shared a lot already. Um, I was talking about, oh, okay, so I was talking about going to my music. So I mentioned like the difficulty, the challenge about my practice, my routines. Ironically, what I'm working on right now is um, a book, a booklet that articulates basically the Friends of Sangha Yosef Rastafari. So it's basically like a summary of the things that we do in the Sangha Yosef, and particularly for those who have an interest, Friends of Sangha Yosef Rastafari. Not necessarily joining and everything else, but for those who want to be like in a relationship without actually being membership and committing to the trod of discipline and prohibitions, because we live a very strict life, to be honest. So a lot of people have an affinity towards what we share, and have an interest in ongoing relationship with what we do and what we share, without having to specifically be involved and committed within our actual spiritual community proper like. So, but what we also recognize is that we need that type of commitment. We need that type of distinction as spiritual community to do and share in the work that we have. So for a long time we kind of just like we're amorphic. We're kind of like just like go with the flow and everything else like that. People come and go, people stay. But what we recognize right now is we need definitive spiritual community of people say yes, okay, this is us. And in doing that, we also need um, the continuing, the ongoing circle around us that's beyond our actual immediate definitive spiritual community. And so this booklet is like sharing what our spiritual community is about, the service that we share in terms of world liberty education, learning about the world civilization from the Afrocentric mystic spirituality of Rastafari, of one love, learning about the one world with one love. And so we put this material together for those who have that interest. That's what I'm doing at the moment. That's what I'm in the process of doing. And so part of that, in defining who we are as a spiritual community of what we do, not just what we believe, but what we do. Ironically, I'm being taken away from doing that to put this together. And so the purpose of it is to be able to further do it in a proficient way. So it's like, but that's not the wisdom. The wisdom is just do it and be it. And if there's a necessity of a booklet, do it little by little as you continue strong in your faith and strong in your discipline, your deen, the mitzvot, and additionally. Now, that's not all of it though, because amidst this, we're dealing with warfare, serious, serious, and so we don't have immediate control of those conditions, and so that's part of the necessity of spiritual community as well. So it's not just a matter of like continuing and doing the rituals, and then just like in the off time putting this together. It's like, seriously, this is conditions, and there's an absence of something. Actually, it's a lot of things have like quieted down for the moment. To be honest, tough significantly within recent weeks as I'm immersed in the earthly experience. Um, but we do have that necessity of being in community and sharing in the work. And again, particularly in the guidance of being married and having children, um, households living together as community. So putting this together for that purpose, and ironically, paradoxically, um, it takes me away from practicing. So recognizing this and recognizing some of the cause and effect, because in doing this, when I access the internet to do communications, and additionally, I get influenced by the internet. I get influenced. I get ideas. I have conversations. The conversations have influences and lead to other suggestions and ideas, and those ideas involving projects and further actions and connections and additionally, and so those further draw away from the core of this trod. So, um, and these recordings are evidence of some of that um, tendency. So recognizing that, even just like anytime I commit myself towards anything that requires money, that's huge. It doesn't matter how much money it is, just being enveloped in the realm of money. That's huge. Anytime I commit myself towards utilizing public transportation, that's huge. That significantly affects the concentration. And that's not blaming, there's no blame. It's just understanding the nature of things. So I'm looking at the framework of the schoolhouse right now. Now that's my doing, and that's being enveloped in other types of distractions, and additionally. Um, all that being said is that recognizing this, and I predominantly live off grid. Um, Technically, lightweight. This is off grid at the moment. Um, the internet has connection to me at this moment, but my connection to the internet is absent at the moment. I don't have Wi-Fi, and additionally, so I'm recording this offline with the intentionality of uploading it later at some point if it's being in the Wi-Fi connection, God willing. So I'm aware that the offline, or I'm aware that online has access to this computer at this moment. And for those who have the technology capabilities, have access to accessing this um, video feed and everything at this very moment. So it's on the grid in that respect. I have to be mindful of that and honest about that. But in my mindfulness, or in my access to the internet is distant right now. I don't have Wi-Fi connection, so I say that because being mindful of the influences when I do have access to the internet. It's just huge cipher influence, so influential in terms of just thoughts, um, not even just selling things or whatever, but just like influencing the things I'm deliberating with at the moment. And even just an idea of a new project or a new event or a new initiative or whatever. Um, and even just like, oh, let me just send this notice to so and so right quick. How much that veers from me doing this core practice. So, all that being said, I'm mindful of how much these influence me personally. Everybody can speak for their own selves, but I'm observing this within myself. And knowing that, I recognize, again, even just taking the bus, it's a beautiful experience, particularly within the recent weeks after some challenging experiences, have beautiful conversations on the bus and beautiful experiences on the bus. And I have that for years and years. But even then, it's distancing me away from this core practice of my spiritual practice, of this spiritual practice. Um, Even just having money in the pocket is a distraction. And there's just a mindfulness of all the different vying for forwarding that money in a specific way. So it's very calming. It's very liberating for the mind to be without that, not to think about that, not to have to think about that. Um, so, and there's value for that because it's that liberated mindset that enables the materials, the curriculum that we share about learning about rivers and learning about languages and learning about calendars, song, stories, rituals, and ethics. Um, and there's resonance with what we share. So, by the grace of the Most High, all thanks and praise to the Most High. Um, But all this being said, what is recognized is how to be mindful about the influences. I mentioned previously on a previous joint about going without money for a month. I already go without money. I don't utilize money. The quote unquote money that I do utilize is actually a debit card, and it's not actual U.S. legal tender. It's a nuanced version and everything else, but there are limitations. It's not a lot. It can't be utilized for receivers outside of the United States. That's a significant debilitation. It's not accepted for purchase of full-bodied currency like gold and silver. That's a significant debilitation. So it's not actual legal tender. So technically, it's not conventional. It's not U.S. currency. It's money. And to be honest, like if we just look at the the how do I say, the abstraction of it, or the legal communication of it, it's a credit system issued by a bank, a private organization that has its own accounting system, and it has its link through the Visa or the MasterCard, also a private entity, and forwards these credits of according to the mechanics of the actual card or whatever else. But I mean, just in an economic technical term, it's not even U.S. currency legally. So we can talk about whether it's necessary to report it or otherwise. That's another conversation. The amount that I receive in that respect is very minimal, anyways, and it's provided essentially, effectively through the auspices of the U.S. government. So it's not a matter of being hidden from anybody, and I have to be mindful because it's actually not provided directly from the U.S. government. So there's the U.S. government knows what's going on, and anyways, I'm trying to like just cover the official legal basis or whatever. But what the point for all this is, I mentioned going without money recently, and I already do that. Um, I'm talking about the liberation of mind to be able to concentrate on the things that are priority. So, all that being said, what I recognize is that God willing, upon the completion of this booklet to share with kinfolk for the purpose of spiritual community, what I'm looking at is, and I don't like saying what I'm planning to do, whatever else, because it just like puts a lot of weight and everything else without. But it's beneficial to communicate intentionally. So I'm looking at is laying even lower, um, and just studying language as part of what we do with the Schoolhouse Academy Piety. Study language during the day, and then amidst evening to help calm the mind and prepare the mind for an evening rest. If we do work like this, it hits the mind up. Yeah. When we do work, this is work for me to do this and to speak like this. This is work. When we do work like this activates the mind, and it's generally further challenging for the mind to calm down when it's time to go to sleep at or past 2 a.m. So what is beneficial that I recognize for a long time, and in addition to being mindful of what we eat amidst the night hours, amidst the dark hours of the day, is also it's also a matter of being mindful of what we do. And if we're doing work after, and as students, we can get accustomed to that. We can get like enveloped into that routine of doing homework and writing papers and studying late in the evening. But the healthy thing, mind, body, heart, and spirit, is to do that type of labor during the daylight hours, and then toward the evening hours, focus on things that are increasingly relaxing and nurturing and affirmational for body, mind, heart, and spirit. So that includes reading something that along those lines, not reading texts of how to practice conventional tasks, but reading a story, studying something that's comforting, favorable. I mean, it can be studies. It can be studies of one's heritage, ancestry, otherwise. But things particularly like music, art, um, storytelling, listening to stories, those kind of activities in the evening hours, in the dark hours, that help the body and the mind and the heart and the spirit to relax and prepare for going to sleep, going into the dreaming, returning into the dream world, and what we experience within the dream world, so that we have a restful sleep, a productive sleep, productive meaning like thorough in terms of relaxation, and we wake up motivated, we wake up refreshed, we wake up with the light of the soleil. Um, so that's the ideal scenario, and that's help that intentionality helps to experience that ideal scenario. Let me tell it at 2 a.m. In the a.m. 2 a.m. in the a.m. But again, this is work for me, uh, and it causes like it this the cycles, the gears are revving when I do this. Even it's a beautiful thing. It's a holy thing. I appreciate it very much. But it's work, and my gears. I'm thinking. I'm trying to think of what to share, and my gears are going. Now, some people reason in the evening, and we can do that. But it's something that's beneficial to do person to person with natural light. By natural light, I'm talking about candle or wood or something like that. When doing it to a device, the gears are revving, and the energy from the device, from the internet that's accessing me that I don't have access to, that's feeding me right now, and a lot of that energy is agitative. Now, some of the agitative energy is, I mean, all the agitative energy is purposeful. Some of it is needed, um, but at the same time, it's not necessarily needed at that moment. Um, and there are other things that are purposeful too, like sleep. And so it can be difficult to recognize that we get energy when we turn on these devices, particularly when it's online, particularly when we're getting a feed. We're getting energized by the visuals. We're getting energized by the experience of relationship, even when is this joint being recorded right here. Um, so I am energized at this moment of doing this. Even when I'm falling asleep as I'm talking, I'm still getting energized. Maybe not enough at that moment, but um, point is that energy, the energizing, can actually be harmful or hurtful because it can cloud how much we actually need natural rejuvenation. We actually need to be energized through the sleep process. Um, and to experience that yin and yang experience of night and day, awake and sleepfulness, and being continually energized by the pixels, by the light, by what we observe in terms of whether it's man looking at a woman, woman looking at a man, whether it's watching stories, whether it's listening to music, all these different ways we are energized by the devices, through the devices. Um, it it is intoxicating. It's like opium, and people talk about all the different chemicals and biochemistry, whatever. Like just beyond all that, just recognize like just energy, and there's energy that is very healthy energy that we're able to acknowledge and process and readily transform, digest and transform. And then there's other energy that is challenging. There's no bad energy per se. A nuclear explosion isn't even bad energy, but it is destructive of life. There is energy that we gain from these devices, and additionally through these devices, that is destructive of our concentration, of our sense of well-being, and additionally, so it's a matter of being mindful of that. Now, if we're watching it, there's purpose to it, and so, uh, like, well, I'm not going to get into that whole rationalization. It's legitimate, but I'm trying to say like affirmation right now. But the point that the short of that kind of tangent is that we're not always the protagonist in the narratives of the universe. So um, ultimately, each of us is. But um, all right, I'm just gonna leave it at that for the moment. Point is, we can get energized in a way that is not necessarily the most conducive to our well-being, and so to be mindful of that and uh, to identify and cultivate, practice, and strengthen routines that are healthy. Um, our routines where we wake up, routines where we do our whatever our practices of prayer, meditation, yoga, samadhi, davening, salat, and additionally that strengthen our body, mind, heart, and spirit. Our nutrition, routines of nutrition, water, plants, herbs, and additionally routines of exercise and stretching, walking, aerobic exercise, and additionally routines of study, and conversation, interaction with others, socializing, routines of solitude and quietness and withdrawal from activities, and routines of service and providing whatever the vocation is that we have respectively and collectively. Um, and then routines of relaxation and returning, and rejuvenation and preparing for another day of routines. So that's the guidance. And in these routines, through these routines, finding relationship with the Most High God, Elohim, Creator, relationship with the universe, relationship with the natural world, relationship with the seasons and the natural rhythms and the natural cycles of the earth, the natural experiences in relationship with our nutrition and the things that sustain us materially, relationship with other people, with other life, the plants, the animals, but particularly the people who share in these routines with us. And then through that, bringing further life, new life, and strengthening life through our relationships. So that's the guidance. And that's what we endeavor. Uh, Patience, forgiveness, understanding, trust. Those are some of the things that accompany us on the trot. And with that said, yo, it's done. It's gone. It's over. Yo, we're on it. Completion for this evening. We give all thanks and praise to the Most High. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.